Alright, welcome back. So we've got a placeholder to start doing some image uploads. The first thing we've got to do is we've got to add Angular Fire. So I'm going to go look at my book links and see if I can't find a little bit of advice for Angular Fire 2 setup. And so this is the same as it's always been, no real change to this guy. So I'm just going to come over here to Terminal, open up a new window of Terminal. Sorry, I guess I should open up a new tab of Terminal. And I'll paste that in and let that happen. So far, Angular Fire has been pretty stable throughout the course with the setup. You can see that you're going to need your environment. So I guess I should go over and get my environment. So I go over to the overview, and I kind of grab this chunk there. And I'm going to put that into both my prod and my also dev environment. Just makes life easier whenever you're just kind of doing simple stuff. So this is my Firebase config, and this is my API key information, and then I like trailing commas, so I put a trailing comma on there as well. And then I'm going to do the same thing in my dev environment, so I've got those two set up. The next thing it wants me to do in the instructions is it wants me to go into the app module. I can do that, and it wants me to add those two imports. Go over into my app module and add those two imports. And then it wants me to add this right here, initialize app. I can do that. These steps are unchanged. By the way, Angular Material changed a bunch lately, but these steps are all pretty much the same. After you do the high level, you've also got to get the individual ones. We're only using the database this time. And since we're only using the database, we don't have to worry about the auth import. So I'm just going to grab the database there, and then the database line from right in here. Cool, so I think that'll do the Firebase setup. And then the other thing I want to do is I want to do Angular Flex layout setup. We're not going to do Angular Material 2 this time. It's a pretty simple app, and we don't really need it. And Angular Fire and Angular Flex layout are both pretty quick installs, so I'll do them with you. If we're doing Angular Materials install, I might make you do that all by yourself. We'll grab the import here. Things are pretty accustomed to. And then the last one we have to add here is the Flex layout module. Great. So I could probably test those a little bit, but I feel pretty good about those things. So we'll just say add Angular Fire 2 and Flex layout. So now we've got those in our app. Next thing I had to do is I had to go play with some HTML. So right now my HTML is all the boilerplate stuff. Don't need any of that. So goodbye to all of that. Instead, I'm going to start typing just some of my own stuff here. So I'm going to have this top area, which is going to be for featured photos. So I'm just going to make it an H1. Inside this H1, I'm going to start off with an input element of type equal to file. So this will be our first time we've ever used an input of type file, but that's kind of a neat thing to do. And whenever it changes, so it changes when somebody uploads a file, we'll call a function, and we'll call featured photo selected, and we're going to pass in the event. So you pass in the event. It turns out that the only thing that the TypeScript really needs is it needs a reference to this input element. So you're passing it the event just so that you can pull the target off of it, which is this input element. So you pass that thing in. I guess technically with inputs you should end them with slash less than, but to be honest that doesn't matter, so I'm going to try it without it. And then I'll just stick on an HR after that. Cool, so let's come over and see what this looks like. Looks like I accidentally closed my local host. So this says featured photos and it says choose file. It's kind of neat what you get for free. So if you click on choose file, it actually opens up like a photo picker, which is cool. Now, if you pick a photo and you hit OK, it's going to crash your app because you said to call a function, which you haven't made yet, right? So it obviously crashed. So featured photo selected, it's not a function. So what I want to do is I want to copy this and go put it over in my TypeScript. And so instead of title app, I just want to put it right here. And so here's where it gets more interesting. So we're starting to do things in TypeScript. So something got passed into this. Let's go ahead and call it an event. And the type of this event, just because I've looked it up once upon a time, is an MS input method context, which is of course a mouthful, but that's what it is. Bear with me with some of these crazy types, and then we'll show you a way to clean it up later. And the only thing I care about is the target. And the target is an HTML input element. We could probably be more specific than that too, but I'm just going to stick with HTML input element, and that's coming from the event.target. Now it yells at you because event.target isn't necessarily an input element, so really you should cast it to say that it is an HTML input element, which is exciting. And then from that input element, what I want is a list of files. And it's of type file list, and it's equal to target.filelist. Oops, just files. And then from those files, all I really want is a singular file. So I really just want a singular file. And so this is files array element 0. And then what I want to do is I just want to print out selected file name. And I'm just going to print out what the file name is. So file.name is what I'm going to print out. Cool. So let's go ahead and try this, and then we'll see if we can make it kind of a little simpler after that. So what this should do, once it's recompiled, is when you click on choose file, I'll just say 007 here, and it just says selected file name 007, which is a .jpg. Kind of a crazy file name, but that's fine. Now, what we've done here is totally functional, but really we did a lot of work just to get the file. And you'll notice that we knew what type this was, and we knew what type this was, and we casted it. And to be honest, like whenever it gets that complex, I just cheat, right? So I just say event, you're an any, right? And then I just cut to the chase. I just say event.target.file0. And this is one thing that I like about TypeScript is if you ever find that the types are getting in your way, you can just get rid of them, right? Because it really just transpiles to JavaScript. And so I'm just going to say, hey, this event is an any, which means, hey, don't mess with me, type checker. I happen to know that an event has a target has files, and those files are going to be an array, and I'm going to grab the 0th item in order to be a file. Now, maybe there's some error checking, like if they cancel, that I should be careful about, but I'm not too worried about it for this app. So I'm just grabbing the file name off there. Let's make sure it still works. So I click on choose file, and I'm going to grab number 43 here, and it says you selected file number 43, which is great. All right, so we're actually getting the information about what file the user selected in TypeScript, but we're not doing anything with it yet. And so it's time to start putting things into Firebase. Now, whenever you're using the Firebase, either the database or storage in this case, you really do want to always do dependency injection for the Angular Fire database. And the reason for that is because it'll do some initialization things, right? So even if you're not using the database, you're just using the Firebase SDK directly, it's still good to do this because it does some initialization things. What we're going to actually do is we're going to use Firebase directly. What this import does, this is the import we've used a lot, we've got a snippet for it, is it imports the Firebase standard SDK, and by saying /app, it doesn't import everything in the Firebase JavaScript. It only imports the pieces you said you wanted. And the pieces you said you want, if you go over to the app module, is that you need the initial setup stuff, and then you need the database. You don't need authentication. That's all well and good most of the time, but we're going to be using storage, and storage is currently not supported. When we go to a tab here, yeah, this is the page I was looking for. At the time of this filming, like middle of the summer of 2017, storage doesn't exist. So there is no Angular Fire storage yet. It's a work in progress. There's people that say, oh, it's going to be done by the end of the week or things like that. But to be honest, thus far, it doesn't exist. And so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be using the standard Firebase JavaScript for all of our storage work. Since we want to be using the standard Firebase storage, we actually have to delete the word /app. And by deleting the word /app, what that does is that imports the kitchen sink, right? So all of the Firebase JavaScript is imported, which to be honest really isn't that much, but it'll bring in the storage things, even though we didn't ever say we needed them. It's just how storage works right now. As soon as they have it as a first-class citizen, it will work out a little smoother. But as of this filming, it doesn't exist, which is fine. All right, so now I've got Firebase ready to go. So now what I want to do is I want to actually store this photo. So there's a couple pieces that I need from this. One thing I need some metadata. And so the metadata that I'm going to make is I'm going to get what type of content is it. So there's a field called content type. And that content type is just the files.type. So I'm going to need to tell Firebase, hey, what type of file is this? Like, is it a JPEG? Is it a PNG? Things like that. To be honest, you can get away without it, but I saw somewhere where it was best practice, so I do it now too. The next thing we're going to need is we're going to need a storage reference. So I'm going to just say storage ref here. And what we're going to do is we're going to say firebase.storage. Much like the database, that's actually a function call. I'll give myself a little more space here. And then I'm going to say .ref. And then it kind of works a lot like the database in that you can say like .child on things. And so the child that I want is I want photos. And then after that, I want features. And then I want URL1. I could totally just say .child, and just kind of keep putting them on here. But if that's too verbose, you can actually do it shorter just by saying, when you say ref, you can actually put in the path right here. So I'm going to say photos/featured/URL1. So I'm eventually going to have two photos. So I'm going to say photos featured URL1 and photos featured URL2. This gives you an object, and I like to specify my object. So the type of object that this thing is it is a Firebase Storage. And now note over here, there's no parentheses. It's not a function call, it's a namespace. And it's a Firebase Storage reference. So can't quite get it all on the screen there, but hopefully you can kind of work it out on your screen. So that's the piece we need. Oops, I misspelled the word storage there. Storage without the extra E. We're going to say .put, and we're going to put in the file along with the metadata. And it's kind of interesting that that's really like all you need to do to put something into your storage. I'm going to go ahead and move this log down here to the bottom. And we'll go ahead and change the log to say uploading. Cool. And so what this will do is this will actually upload the file. Nobody will know about it, but it'll actually be in my storage, which is kind of cool. So let's go try this guy out. So now I'm clicking on this thing. I'm going to go grab some small pictures. I'm going to grab just a picture of me that I know is small. And it'll say uploading. That's all the feedback you get. That's where it's done. But we can go see it in your Firebase storage area. So if you go back over to storage now, you'll notice that there's a thing called photos here. If you were on this page previously, you will have to hit refresh. I think it's funny that Firebase doesn't automatically refresh anything in the console, which I just think is funny. But you go into photos, you go into featured, you go into URL1, and you can see that it successfully uploaded the photo. So that's cool, right? Now, in order to actually use this in your app, what you're going to need is you're going to need the file's location. You're going to need the download URL. Just this one time, we're going to cheat. And so what we're going to do is we're just going to copy this. I'm just going to click right here to copy it. So it says copy to clipboard. And we're going to save in our database the download URL. So like where to go to. So here's what I'm going to do. You should do this too. So photos, featured, URL1 is going to be this value right here. You'll notice that kind of best practice is to keep your storage paths and your database paths kind of like, you know, in lockstep. It's just, it keeps things more organized and you can remember what goes with what. So what I'm saving in the database is the download URL to the photo. So it's kind of interesting that it doesn't matter where this photo is on the internet. It's just somewhere on the internet. It just so happens that you're the one who saved it. Really, you're just pointing to it just because it's a photo that's on the internet. I think that's kind of neat. So here's what we want to do. We want to display the photo, right? So our goal is to display the photo under here. So that's what we're going to do. To do it, we're going to create an interface. So just bear with me for a second and then it'll all come together. So it's going to be an interface called featured photos, featured photo URLs. And it's going to have a URL1, which is optional, which is a string. And then a URL2, which is also optional, which is a string. And the reason I'm making this interface is so that I can use Angular Fire to look at this object right here. So it's going to have a featured, and it's going to have a URL1 and a URL2. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a stream connection to that guy. So I'm going to say public, technically the word public is optional, featured photo stream. And my featured photo stream is a Firebase object observable. So we haven't used object observables a lot, but they're really not hard. And it's of type featured photo URLs, which is why I made that thing. It says Firebase object observable. What are you talking about? And you just need an import. And then we'll actually make it in the constructor. So we'll say featured photo stream is equal to this.db.object. And then we'll specify what path it's on. And the path that it's on is photos, featured. Oh, yeah, that's the whole path. So it's the object that's at photos featured. So it's going to make a connection to this area, and whenever it changes, the stream is going to know about it. Great, so now we can use that stream in the HTML. Notice I said public here, but really that's the default. So you could take off the word public if you wanted. And what I want to do is I want to show that image over here in my HTML. So I'm going to say image, and it's going to have a source. I'm going to be using JavaScript, so I put it in brackets. This thing is in JavaScript. And I've got my featured photo stream piped to async, and that'll give me the entire object, but really I just want one piece of it. And the piece that I want is the .url1 part of it. Also, whenever you use streams, they come back null the first time, like instantly they're null and then they come back good. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put an Elvis operator here, so the question mark. And this is an optional which says, hey, assuming that this thing is not null, give me URL1 from it. And then best practice is to always add an alt, which is just a description of what this thing is. And so this is just a featured photo. I guess I could say featured photo 1. So here we've got an image. I happen to know that inputs and images both like flow onto the same lines. So I'm going to stick a BR between them here just so they kind of look a little better. Great. So in theory, this should work. I kind of feel like I've done something wrong, so I bet it doesn't. But hey, presto, looks like it worked. The downside is, of course, is that if you say choose file, and you choose a different file, there's a chance that the upload URL is different, right? So it uploaded this new picture. So if I go into my storage, it should have changed the photo now. So I go photos, featured, URL1. You'll see that it's a different photo, but the download URL changed, right? And so I'm going to click on this download URL again here, and then I'm going to go dump this new download URL into my database, and then now it should switch over to the new image. You'll notice that this particular image is huge, so I need to add a quick CSS rule. That's no problem. And I'm just going to say, hey, all images get a max height of 300 pixels. There we go. And so now my image is not colossally large. So obviously, we don't want to have to manually grab download URLs like that. That's not the goal, but we are not going to fix it this time. So we've got a couple things we still want to do. We want 2 of these things, and then we want to not have to manually grab the download URL. I think we've done enough for this time, though. We're uploading photos, we're manually getting their download URL, and we're displaying them on the page. Good enough for now. All right, we will see you next time. Bye.